Welcome to the Creepin' It Real Show, your one-stop shop for weird news, movie reviews, otherworldly, and paranormal shenanigans. We'll take a dive into what's going on in creepy pop culture. You can follow Creepin' It Real Show on Twitter at creepin_it. You can email us at creepinitrealshow@gmail.com. And you can also go to our website, creepinitshow.com. Welcome to the Creepin' It Real Show. I am one of your hosts, Yardley, here from Atlanta, Georgia. And I want to introduce my co-host, Kristi, a little bit north of where I am at. How are you doing?
Hey, Yardley. I'm doing good. I guess we're going to be a two-man show tonight, but I think we can pull it off.
Yeah, I think so. I think we'll be okay. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a couple of things that happened in the news that we can talk about before we segue into the Netflix original movie called The Perfection. So, you ready to knock out some weird news first?
I'm ready.
All right. Well, what I got is something on the pop culture angle, and I figured I would throw this in because more than anything else, I was curious about what you and Moni had to say about it, but it's pop culture related, so it's officially official now that Robert Pattinson is going to be the new Batman in Matt Reeves' The Batman trilogy. So it was just a few questions that I just, I wanted to ask you before we move on to the next story. So, one, of course, is what do you think of this casting in particular?
You might surprise you. I am a pretty big Batman fan. I've watched all of them. I love Batman. Um, I mean, I don't know how you can replace Christian Bale or Michael Keaton in any of these roles. I mean, I think every time they announce a new Batman, there's like this outrage because nobody's going to be happy. I don't know who you could cast to truly make people across the board happy. I wasn't expecting this. I hope that he gets kind of buff and not so broody and like I don't know. He's a little what do you call it? Hipster in my opinion, like hipster Batman. So, I'm not 100% against it. I'll hold my official judgment until I see what he can do and what's the storyline. What kind of Batman is this going to be? Because they've all been so different. Some of them have been absolutely ridiculous. Like, I'm sorry, Val Kilmer to me was like, this is a freaking joke. And many of them were, but him to be like, to me, the biggest joke. I, I'm going to try to stay optimistic about it, but a really bizarre choice, if you ask me. What do you think,
Yeah.
Yardley?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, you can't go in into producing a movie or a television show or anything else. Your intention can't be to please everybody. So
Mm-mm.
that's something that
Impossible.
I wouldn't, I wouldn't even do. I, I'm I'm familiar with him from things that weren't Twilight. Like I know that
Yeah,
he was in that Twilight stuff, but I never saw, any of
you're
them. So
lucky.
I don't really, yeah. So I don't really have an opinion on that front. But I think he was in, The Lost City of Z, and what was that other movie I saw him in?
He was in Water
Uh,
for Elephants.
yeah, I don't know what the other movie that I saw him in. Why it's not in my mind right now. But I
Mm-hmm.
saw him in like a couple of indie projects, and then there's also a project that he has, and I guess the listeners are pretty much going to figure this out really quick. Like even though that this is news, I didn't dig super deep into every movie that he's been in, but I
Mm-hmm.
did see a preview for a movie that I think it's him, Andre 3000, and some other people. It was like some type
What?
of it was a movie that takes place out in space or something like that. It's an indie movie, but it's something that's pretty recent. I don't know if it's been
Huh.
released. Um, Maybe as we start, digging a little bit deeper into some of our other topics, I might try to pull up the IMDb
Okay.
and see what that movie is. But it actually looked pretty interesting. But for me, the things that I have seen him in, um, they were a little bit more serious or artsy. But I think that he's okay to me. And I don't think that this particular Batman, from what I was reading, it was saying that it's not like an origin story, so we're not going to see Bruce Wayne's parents killed again, blah, blah, blah.
Thank God.
But I'm not, I mean, for me, I mean, I kind of hope that this is more of a Batman from the detective comics, like Batman being a detective, which is stuff that you don't really get
Mhm.
in these movies. You
Yeah.
know, him just doing, because, you know, some of the comic books aren't kind of the things that you see in, like, what was it Super Friends and things like that, or
Mhm.
like the campy Batman, or the ones that we're familiar with Christian Bale and some of the others. They're
Right.
all, I mean, you know, some of those, I mean, they're all kind of different, but they're still kind of the same. And
Right.
depending on how they do this, I'll just try to, cast my judgments. But
Yeah. I
like I
think
said,
I'm sorry. I think it depends on the generation too. Like I grew up, the first Batman I saw was with Michael Keaton, and that was the 80s, 90s, darker kind of it had some camp to it, but it wasn't, I don't know. It just almost got into like a ridiculousness after a while. I don't know if there was like some contest to like outdo each Batman, but for me, the Michael Keaton Batman, I say Batman because there's several movies with him in them, but that was my jam.
yeah,
That's
that's my
my
favorite one too.
favorite. Yeah, I love the Michael Keaton ones. It's my thing. So I thought Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman was the shit. She just freaking nailed it. Jack Nicholson as the Joker. I don't know how you can touch that. And I know people, they've tried, but I don't know. I mean, if you're right, if they spin it in a way that's a little bit more like you said, detective-y, maybe I could see it. So it's not relying so much on his strength, and his badassery of gadgets and strength and fighting. I just can't see him fighting. He's like a waif. He's like really tall and gaunt, and I just can't see
Yeah.
it. So maybe they'll put a different spin on it, or maybe he's just going to freaking bulk up in the next 2 years and surprise us all. I'll watch it. I'm just
Yeah.
not exactly pumped that it's happening.
I think a certain amount of people, I mean, there's a certain percentage of people who are going to show up just because it's Batman, but at the same
Right.
time, I think that DC properties, I don't know how much capital they have left to spend with Batman. I mean, we've seen a ton of different Batmans.
Yeah.
Wonder Woman is coming up on her second movie.
I can go for
Superman.
that. I can totally buy into
Uh,
Wonder Woman.
well, Superman um, you know, has had its fair share
Yeah, they got to
of
go.
movies,
Superman's
but
got to go.
yeah, but I think that they probably need to kind of expand. The only thing that I would say that would probably worry me, because I know the people who are passionate about Batman, they really are, passionate about that character. I just don't know, looking at the amount of capital that DC has, I don't know if you should focus on a trilogy of movies. Just make good, just just do one good movie.
Yeah.
Look at potentially how it's received. Of course, you got to look at the dollar amount, because at the end of the day, all of these movies, it's a business. So people are in this to make money. And I think that it's interesting that a lot of times people are so focused on trying to do three, when it's like, why don't you just focus on making one bomb one, and
Mm-hmm.
then the rest could follow.
Exactly,
But
and see how it flows. Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
so
I find it bizarre that they're willing to put that much like time into backing him. That just is
yeah, but
bizarre to me. I'm really. It
like,
means to me that they've got some sort of plan. I mean, it's got to be.
yeah, I mean, the reason why I don't, well, like I said, I'm kind of indifferent towards him. Like I said, I can't say that I've seen him in anything that I just really hated,
Well,
but at
watch
the same,
Twilight and get back to me.
but that's totally out of my
Mm.
wheelhouse. So that's not something that I would do. But I mean, I don't. I really do believe that he was. If they picked him, then he was probably the best out of the people that came.
I would
Though, yeah,
love to know who else showed up for
yeah,
that
because
interview.
I can't remember the name of the
Oh,
other person. Actually, I don't know if you I don't think that this Deadline article, because Deadline is always breaking stuff. I don't really remember who the other person. There was somebody that was being buzzed about as also being looked at for the
Mm-hmm.
role of this, and it was somebody that I wasn't familiar with, so that's the reason why the name is not catching me. But I'm pretty sure that there were other candidates as well, and if he was the best one, then good luck to him. I haven't. I think the last time I went and saw a Batman movie that I actually went and paid for it was probably the whichever one had Heath Ledger. So I think that was the Dark Knight or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that that was the only Batman movie that I've paid for. And if I went before that, well, of recent note, before that, I think the last one was Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
So that one. But you know what? It's interesting, and since we're
Who
on
would
the
you
topic,
who would you pick really quick to be Batman?
I I have no one that I would pick because Batman is like kind of low on my list.
But if
You
you
know what
had
I
if
mean?
it was up to you to choose.
Oh, let's see. Oh gosh, what's the guy from Mad Men? The guy with the jaw. What's his
John
name?
Hamm?
Yeah, him. Yeah, John Hamm.
You
I would
know,
probably, I
I
would
would
probably
I would like to
roll with
see
him.
like Michael B. Jordan. I could totally see him as Batman, although I know he's already taken for character, but I'd
Yeah.
like to change it up a little bit. It's
Well,
like I
well,
don't
these
know.
comic books, Christy, they have all these alternate universes and all of this
Mhm.
stuff. So I would not be surprised if there's a comic book out there that that like had a black Batman or something like that.
Or how
Like
about
all of these
Idris?
books. Yeah, but he can't do everything. It's almost like you want me to tell you
Yeah,
why there
he
aren't
can.
you want me to tell you why there aren't enough like
He
black
can.
people in Hollywood is that
Why?
whenever it's like the same black people are the ones that people pick for
Yeah.
stuff. So which just goes to show you that
And then they like
there's
wear out their welcome, and everybody's like, all right, we get
but
it."
and plus Idris. Well, the only reason why I would say no to that is just he's older. Like he's
Yeah.
whoever you have to play Batman, you have to have a person who can grow into it. Because I know that people are going to potentially want to make additional movies. So the person has to be as an age like Pattinson, where if you're going to
Yeah.
make three, he doesn't really age out of it. Yeah, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that's probably another reason why they did it. And that's why I wouldn't pick someone like Idris, because Idris is like, he's up there. Like, you know what I mean? And if you've got a trilogy of movies, you got to think that all three are going to come out probably within 6 years.
True.
So now you got, and
Got
I
some
get it,
gray
makeup.
hair showing.
So, you know what? But
All right.
it'll be fun, and it'll be fun to see what comes out of this. And whenever we get a
Yeah.
trailer, I guess we'll talk about that on the show.
Do you
So
know?
one,
I guess they haven't announced like a release date or anything.
no, no,
Okay, I don't think so.
I mean, technically, this is still in the negotiation process to get him locked down, but it's
Mhm.
pretty much a done deal because it's broke on Deadline.
Mhm.
The Hollywood Reporter and some of these other credible outlets are basically saying, "Hey, the deal is almost done," and it is going to be him. So we'll see. But if you look at the internet, this is apparently the worst. The internet for the people who care, like about Batman or whatever. People are crying foul about it. But you know what? We'll see what he can do because I'm never going to
Mhm.
diss anybody for
Yeah,
getting
none.
work
Yeah, I mean,
or
let's
what.
see what they got. Like, I don't diss people either until I think we just get so ahead of ourselves and immediately shit on things because we're creatures of habit and we like what we like, and anything new comes in the mix. It's like, oh no.
Yeah.
So I'm like laughing about it, and I think I'm hilariously optimistic about it. Like, this is funny. I can't picture this, but I'll give it a
Well,
chance.
since we're talking about comic characters and things like
Yeah.
that, I'm just going to quickly just talk about the Swamp Thing trailer was
Yeah,
released, and
I saw that.
yeah, and this is going to be a television series that you'll be able to access through apparently the DC universe.
It's a
So
series? I
yeah, I
thought
think
it
yeah,
was
it's gonna
a
be
movie.
it's gonna be a series, and I mean,
Oh.
you like myself. I mean, I didn't read Swamp Thing as a comic books, but of course, back in 1982 when
Mm-hmm.
Swamp Thing came out, and I was like, back then I think I was like 10 or something like that. Or I mean, 11, 10 turning 11. It came out like February. So I think
Yeah.
it came out like right before my birthday. And That's the one that I was familiar with, but I actually used to like every time that it was on television, I watched it. So I really
Oh, me
used
too.
to, and sometime like maybe the end of last year, or like on one of these, raggedy channels, whatever local channels, they actually had it on, and it was, it was still pretty fun. But when I saw the DC Universe trailer, this looks good, and it looks, it looks creepy. Everything, tonally, it seems like it's a little dark. I don't know. I mean, I pretty much guarantee that there is going to probably be more levity in it than the
Hmm.
trailers let off. I
Right.
don't think it would consistently be that gloomy, but the trailer I thought knocked it out of the park, and it definitely got me curious. Is this something that you would be interested in seeing if it wasn't on DC Universe? Because I doubt that you're going to buy that thing just to watch
No,
it.
I really enjoyed the trailer. I was pleasantly surprised. I knew that they were coming out with this. I thought it was a movie, but if it's a series, that's fine. I would like you. I loved Swamp Thing when I was a kid, and watched it every time it came on, just like you. You know, it was on HBO all the time. It was like just regularly showing, constantly rerun, and I had to watch it every time. I really like the concept. I like it's kind of a disease, and I think it's going to be interesting. Um, I mean, I'm assuming it's being filmed in Louisiana. It looks like Louisiana. It almost reminded me of like the viral True Blood, like the environment and the way it was dark and was swampy and everything. So for some reason, True Blood popped into my head when I was watching it, but I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be good. It seems like a really good way to introduce this character into this this generation.
Yeah, yeah. The trailer hit all of the it checked off all the boxes for me. I
Hmm.
mean, if I didn't, I wish this came on something where I didn't have to like get DC Universe or something
Right.
like that to watch.
I didn't even
But
know that existed.
well, yeah, but you know what? A lot of these, a lot of studios, a lot of content. Let's be real here. Like streaming and special services to get this, like that's just the way it is, and it's the future.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's not surprising, but I wouldn't subscribe to that. Look, we have our ways. Like with the
Hmm.
internet, oh, we'll all see
It's
it.
out there. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
Absolutely.
um, I totally look forward to it, and I've got way higher hopes probably for that
Hmm.
than I might do a trilogy of these new Batmans, because I'm rooting for Pattinson to do well in it, but this is just kind of more up my alley.
Right.
You know what I mean? I just feel like I'm
Absolutely.
Batmaned out. So anything that's
Agreed.
new is going to have my antenna go up a little bit more. Now, and speaking of new, we've got a
Hmm.
new Godzilla movie, and
Yes.
you had a chance to check it out in IMAX?
I did. It was an accident, kind of, to watch it in IMAX. I wasn't actively searching, but I was really, really busy last week, and I completely forgot that Godzilla dropped. And so I was scrolling the internet, and it was Saturday, and all of a sudden come across, people talking about it, and I'm like, holy shit, I am so busy that the movie I've been waiting to drop for like 6 months, totally forgot about. So I yelled out throughout the house, who wants to go to Godzilla? And my son, of course, jumped and was like, me. So I booked him and I tickets, and came across available in IMAX, and so booked those, and oh my gosh, it was awesome. It
Okay.
was just awesome to see in IMAX. I mean, it was a good movie. If you look, there's people that are bitching about it's Godzilla. You have to like Godzilla. You can't walk into that theater and expect, I don't know. Like, you have to like monsters, creature features, and you have to really understand and like Godzilla. This is the one where he comes out and like finally is being more accepted as the good guy, and understanding that he's here. He don't give it, humans are fine and all, but he's here to like save the planet. So, whatever that takes. And so it's just one of those things. And so we ended up getting fourth row of IMAX because everything else behind us was packed. And I'm like, fourth row should be okay. We walked out of that theater and my son was like, it was like we were in the middle of the city while they were fighting. It was crazy. It was really good. We enjoyed it. I enjoyed the film. It was really, get your feels and get your huge Godzilla on. He's basically the star of the movie, and I was totally down for it. So,
Yeah.
recommended.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's what's up. I have not seen it yet, but I've read because I mean I think the ratings for it is they're pretty horrible. I think it's like in the 40s, but
Well,
also
that's a shame.
it it made like it made 49 million, the opening weekend,
Right.
which is a million lower than the low projections that a lot of people had for it, but
Hmm.
but I think that it came out I think it still came in like 45 million lower than the
Right.
last, Godzilla. I think they came out in 2000 and something, maybe 2004, just
Hmm.
whenever the last one came out. So it really did underperform that one. But
Hmm.
I'm with you. When we were talking about it before you went and saw it, I was basically saying that, hey, you know what? I don't care about Millie Bobby Brown. I don't care about
No.
none of those other people in it. I want to see Godzilla. However, a lot of the people that are complaining about it are complaining about it because they were just saying that the human element in the plot line was garbage. Now, the only reason why I will defend that is you're not going to get a movie with this budget, with all of that animation. You're not going to get hour 45 minutes of Godzilla action. So you have to
Hmm.
have
Hmm.
those humans in it. So that is important. Like I can never poo-poo that off because the fact of the matter is you've got to have that because budget-wise, unless you are really going to break the bank. And don't get me wrong, I know that these actors have to get paid, but I'll tell you what, most of the time that was spent putting that movie together was on, the graphics and what I'm saying, all of
Right.
the animation and all of that
I'll
stuff.
I'll I'll tell
So
you one thing is when all those titans started rising out of their little sleeper states. That's basically the premises of the movie. Is somebody
uh,
starts releasing all the titans around the globe. We're seeing these titans come out from like all the old Godzilla movies, all in one movie. My Godzilla nerd ass was I didn't give a shit about the plot. Seeing these monsters come to life in 2019 in all their,
yeah,
cinematographic, computer glory was it made my heart happy. I loved it. It was
yeah,
so fanatically awesome and cheesy and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I
yeah,
loved the special effects. I didn't give a shit about, the humans and what they were doing. Some
yeah,
of them were surprisingly up to no good and plot twist. And I'm like, I don't care. Show more Titans, please. Like that's all I really cared about. And
yeah.
it delivered to me and my son loved it too. We enjoyed it. I'm a huge Godzilla fan. I love all the old Godzillas and surprisingly as somebody who isn't into like DC, Marvel, or any of that, I do really love me some Godzilla. So it
Yeah.
delivered for me. And like I said, if you're not a big Godzilla person, I can understand why you'd be like, what? But I am, and I saw him, and he was in there a lot, and it made me happy.
If a person wasn't a real Godzilla fan, I think that they could still appreciate the special effects that was in it. Because for
Yeah,
me, I think that as a I'm a Godzilla fan. I mean, I've seen a lot of the old. I mean, even the cheesy ones because we grew up off
absolutely.
of the
Those are the
guy, off the
best.
people
Yeah.
in the suits and whatnot. But um, we do live in a great time. Like if you are a comic book fan, you're getting all of these movies and the content is out there. Same thing with Godzilla. I mean, I just have to
Mm-hmm.
say, like, this has to be like a wet dream. If anybody like
Oh,
Godzilla, this is probably the best as far as special effects are concerned that it's had to offer. So at least, if people are into being visually impressed, I'm pretty sure, and with your endorsement, that people could say, hey, maybe that you can check it out. But it's hard for me to kind of poo-poo off the notion, especially when you have to have
absolutely.
that human element. I can't really dismiss people saying, "Hey, they want a little bit more of that." But you know what?
Totally.
That's what's up.
I,
I'll, I'll,
uh,
I'll, I'll I'll probably buy it when it comes out
Yeah.
on iTunes
I
or
think the
something.
thing that made me happy about this movie is I think there was like a slight frustration in a lot of the last few decades of Godzilla movies because there was always like this hint of him being the good guy, but never fully kind of recognized. And it's like on a frustration level because the Japanese didn't play it that way. Yeah, he was destructive. Yeah, he was this, but there was always this underlying message that he's here for a reason. Like, and so they finally did that in this movie. Finally, like they finally like made this message of he's here to balance the planet. He's here for the planet. He don't give you're fine and he's not going to kill you, but his overall concern is planet Earth. And it was like a real good finally true Godzilla message. So behind all the pomp and circumstance and all the effects and all the cheesy plots, that was finally the message that was delivered, which is what I had been waiting for like 20 years. So that's why I was like, yes, finally. People are seeing in the movie, they're seeing he's a good guy and they're not like terrified of him and looking at him as a bad guy. So that's what got me off the whole time. So anyway, we
Well,
can move on. I'm
yeah,
totally
we can
Godzilla
move on,
nerd, but here it is.
doesn't that happen by default when all the other shit has gone to hell? Like you're
It
the
should,
person
but
that you're scared
you
of, you're like,
keep
maybe we can roll with this person,
exactly. We
this
keep
monster.
seeing these movie after movie after movie of people being like afraid of him. And I mean, let's do some deductive reasoning. He's not out killing people, he's like fighting monsters. And yeah, people are dying because they're in the middle of that shit. So it's like, really? You look at him as a
Yeah.
bad guy and he's really not. So anyway, that made
Okay.
me happy. So anyway, anybody who's truly into Godzilla, I mean, appreciate the pieces of Godzilla. They paid a wonderful tribute to him in this movie, I felt. So it's
Yeah.
worth a watch.
I mean, and we're totally gonna move on after I say this, but to be honest with you, if it was just I would probably pay $10 just to see an edit that just had all the Godzilla and all of that fighting, which would probably be what 10 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe,
Honest,
maybe if you're lucky. If you could just edit together all of the fights, I would pay $10 just to go see that, even if it ends up being like a 15.
yeah, I mean, all the fights, sure, but the whole like where they're defrosting and they're rising, like all the bad Titans coming out and being destructive. I mean, that was pretty impressive. And that was a lot of the movie. So I'm surprised people were kind of pissy about it. I'm like, there was a lot of monsters in this movie. We've been doing this show for like a year and a half. And what am I always screaming? Show me the fucking monsters. They showed me the fucking monsters in this movie. The plot, I mean, okay, fine. I thought the plot was fine. I wasn't like, this is the best plot ever, but I mean, after showing me all that monster action, I was fine with whatever else they had to like put in there to make it a movie. I sound like
Okay.
such a jackass, but that's how I felt.
Oh, well, you know what? I
Anyway,
mean, that's what people like what they like. But you know
yeah,
what?
that's
I'm
me.
very, I'm very curious to see how you felt about the movie that we're going to review. So,
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. I don't know if I would have watched this movie if you hadn't suggested it. I mean,
yeah,
I'll tell you my thoughts about it, but honestly, it did not look interesting to me at all when I was reading the reviews because I looked at it before you suggested it and I was like, meh, hard pass. And then you suggested it, I'm like, all right, well, clearly he sees something in it.
yeah. Well, I mean, what I saw in it was what I saw when I actually watched it, because I think it's a relatively, gosh, I think I just saw it pop up,
Mm-hmm.
recently, on Netflix, and if you just looked at the avatar that they had for the movie on Netflix, you wouldn't really. I don't think most people would probably be like you, just kind of like
Yeah.
scroll past it. They'll look at the little synopsis. But something that I read, I don't know. It's just something that I read, and I was like, you know what? Let me go ahead and kind of check this movie out. Well, the movie that we're going to review is called The Perfection, and it is on Netflix. So let me just quickly run down the cast. The character of Charlotte is played by Allison Williams. A lot of people know her from Jordan Peele's Get Out. The character of Lizzie is played by Logan Browning, and she's on the Netflix series Dear White People and a few other, smaller
She's
projects like
smoking
that.
hot, by the way. Holy
Yeah, yeah.
crap.
I can't even. Yeah,
Wow.
just insane.
Wow. And she was in her
Uh,
underwear a lot.
yeah, I know. Just trust me. I hit the pause, and you know how
Whew.
they've
I
got
was
that
like,
little
damn.
10-second back wheel that you can click.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thoroughly examined what was going on for the
So her
show,
body is
and
like perfect.
the
I'm sorry.
the
I'll stop talking about it.
the character of Paloma is played by Aliana Huffman. She was in Smallville and Supernatural, and the character of Anton is played by Steven Weber, who has been in a trillion things, but I'm just going to
Mm-hmm.
point out that he was in Sleepy Hollow, and he does a lot of voice work nowadays for a lot of Marvel, animated projects. So, um, if for nothing else, if you're a person who if you're our age and you're kind of into some of the more modern projects like some of Jordan Peele's work, I think if anything else, you're definitely going to recognize Allison Williams and Steven Weber. And this Steven Weber is one of those people who's been in a million different things over the years.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, he's like the person who you would see and was like, I don't know his name, but I've seen him in a million different movies. So let's talk about what goes down in this. It's a sort of a surprising feature, in my opinion, because there were some things that happened in it, and I know that we're going to get a little bit more in depth in this as we start talking about this. But it definitely throws you off as far as what you think it's about.
Yeah.
When you
Some
first
twists and
start.
turns for sure.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and dive in.
Okay.
So, Charlotte Wilmore is a talented cellist who was forced to leave Backoff, which is a prestigious music school, to care for her dying mother. Her mother's name is Ruth. So, in the present day, Ruth has just died, and Charlotte makes contact with the head of Backoff and her teacher, Anton. She ends up having to travel to Shanghai, where the school is in the middle of selecting a new student to join them. And she becomes aware, becomes aware that the girl who replaced her after she left the school, Lizzie, has achieved considerable success. Everybody is on Lizzie, like she is that thing. And you find that out pretty early, in this movie. So Charlotte attends the selection process of the last three potential students and meets Lizzie, Anton, and his wife Paloma at the back off teacher's feast, at the back off, along with the teachers of Thies and Joffrey. So Charlotte and Lizzie
Mm-hmm.
quickly become friends, and their relationship turns sexual after a night of clubbing. So I need to ask you, and this all of this goes down in what the first 15 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes, of the movie. They're like
Yeah.
literally getting down like that early in the movie. So after this happens, like I really didn't have any idea where the movie was going because I didn't know that it was going to kind of, turn into that, so early. So I was wondering, like, when you saw that sex scene so early in the movie, did it throw you off or make you more interested in keeping on kind of prodding through this movie?
Well, okay, so rewind a hair for me. When they first started the movie, I was a little confused about why she's all the way in China in the first place for a concert that she's not involved in, Charlotte. And that to me was like, why? Like, what is she doing there? That's kind of weird and creepy. Maybe I didn't get the memo and she was invited or something, but I just kind of felt like that was off. And then she's a little older. Um, and there was just some weird vibes there. So I kind of got like this clue pretty quickly that it's just not something that I think a girl would just do is fly across the world for this one concert. I don't know. I mean, of course, we know what her motives were, but at the
Yeah.
time, when you're looking at it with naked eyes, you're like, what does that mean? And then they hooked up, like became friends, and then like an hour later hooked up.
Well, now we do need to let people know there was more to it than that because when
Right.
she
They
is watching some of the performance of some of these these cellist
right.
prodigies, Lizzie and Charlotte actually start building a bond in a conversation that they're having at the event, and they're kind of scanning the room, and it was that one scene where Lizzie was telling Charlotte about this guy, the guy who was in the room who was, I think, like cheating on it.
Yeah, having an
With
affair.
this woman
Yeah.
was having an affair. Yeah, and they were
Yeah.
kind of showing them, going through the process of looking at, how they were flirting with each other and all of these things. So there was a little bit more of a mix of things that kind of
Yeah,
led to them being more familiar with one another, which is also humor and, being nosy. Of course, that kind of, that can bring some folks together. So there
absolutely.
was some of that. So there was a little setup to it, but just like you were saying, they really did kind of, speed through this, but it
Yeah.
actually gave you an idea of where these characters' mindsets were and then what their attraction was based off of some of those conversations from earlier.
And I also felt like, in an off way, they were really similar. I mean, yes, the yeah, of course, they're from similar backgrounds, but just kind of like in their entertainment with themselves, there were people watching, and then I don't know. I felt like there really was a connection there, and so when they had sex, I wasn't really surprised. I thought it was really hot, and I thought it was fantastic. I At this time, I'm thinking this is another Black Swan, but for a band. Cello playing, like
Yeah.
musicians, instead of ballet, we've got, okay, so she's going to turn crazy. That in my mind is because in my mind, there's no other reason why she would have traveled across the planet to be there except for destruction in some way. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, she's creepy. Um, Looking back, I see things differently, and I think the whole point is she saw some of herself in
Yeah.
Lizzie, in more ways than just the cello playing. And you could tell, like you said, when you were watching people and having conversations, they were just kind of two little peas in a pod in this whole auditorium. So I think I thought, a really good way to kind of build a plot that you don't even know is being built yet. It was great. I
Yeah.
thought the sex scenes were fantastic, and even the next day when she wakes up hungover, like it was good the way they handled it.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that you wonder early on are definitely explained out as to why a
Mm-hmm.
little bit later
Mm-hmm.
on. One more thing, for me, and you kind of touched on it when you were talking about the Black Swan
Mm-hmm.
thing, but why does it seem like a lot of movies that involve music or dance tend to be about the dark side of what goes on? And, like everybody else doesn't know about these things
Yeah.
going on. You have a, perception versus the reality. Now, I know when we watch movies and television shows, they put a little extra stank on, or they can put a little bit extra on what's bad. But then again, sometimes real life is even worse,
Well,
than
I
some of
can
the things
answer
we see
that
in movies.
since I was in dance for 11
Yeah.
years as a kid, of course, not into my teens. And then I taught dance in my early 20s to make some money. And I will tell you that the dance industry is a dog, dog eat world. It's brutal, it's backstabbing, and a lot of it, is women can be bitches. And I know that sometimes movies and subjects and themes can overplay the woman against woman situation. But it's there for a reason. I mean, let's be honest with each other. I am the biggest feminist there is, but can be bitches. And so when you're in this kind of field that is so competitive and you spend a decade training and fighting and working out and living and breathing an industry, you're going to do anything to get your goal.
Yeah.
And that means exactly what you said. It means cutthroat. And so it's not really a lie. It's probably an over exaggeration in some cases, but you're right. It can be like pretty brutal, and I'm not necessarily I mean it's dark. It can be very dark. So a lot of hungry, a lot of not eating, a lot of fitting into costumes, a lot of shoes that hurt your feet, and a lot of muscle aches and pains, and for that hour of a show that you do, a couple of times a year. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
dark. It's really, to be honest, it's a dark industry. So, yeah, you nailed it.
Well, I totally get that, but I also think that when it comes to music, you can find a young person who's a prodigy, but I think when it comes to music, you probably have a better chance of having longevity and still being remembered and admired the older that you get and the better that you get in your skills, as opposed to like dance or gymnastics, things where not
Mm-hmm.
only do you have an enemy of the people that you're competing against, your other enemy is age, and it's a young person's game and a lot of
Yep.
that stuff as well. So like even sometimes with acting, when actors get to a certain age, they kind of age out of getting hired, and not necessarily just that. It's just that there aren't as many roles for people who are that or
Yep.
more
Truth.
senior or seasoned in life. So at least in this,
You don't have to
the
worry
cut
about that in a sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the cutthroat nature is probably more about the people in and around it as opposed to the person who's playing it. But then again, I'm
Totally.
not a cellist and I don't know. So any of
And
our listeners, if you can if you can kind of educate us on, hell yeah, it's cutthroat,
but then also,
let us
how
know.
many star cellist opportunities are there? I mean, like 2 or 20? Like,
I,
there might just be one and then that's it. And so you got all these people competing. So it could be worse for the fact that maybe age isn't a discriminatory piece, but the fact that there's only like 5, or who knows. I would be interesting to hear about that, though. You're right. If anybody knows anything about this industry, I'm curious. I'd love to hear about it.
I was in a forum and I was just kind of, I think I googled like what's harder to play, violin or the cello, and it seems that like most of the comments, just most of the research that I was doing, whether it wasn't necessarily, I don't necessarily dig through comments to get my answer, but just kind of looking at some different things that
Hmm.
got pulled up on Google for people who know more about, playing instruments than I do. It appears that playing the cello is a little bit easier
Oh.
than the violin, maybe because of its positioning and things like that.
Hmm.
But you know what? We'll move on because I'm probably sure somebody's listening to this getting pissed off. No, the
You don't know
cello
what the fuck
is
you're talking
way,
about.
yeah, the cello is way harder. But the next day, Lizzie wakes up with a hangover and ends up taking some ibuprofen from Charlotte. Lizzie tells Charlotte that she wants to go backpacking through rural China and invites her to accompany her. As they head to the bus, Lizzie starts to feel ill, which worsens when they stop by a street food stall.
Oh.
Now, this is something that kind of, we didn't mention it at the very beginning, but when they were, kind of sizing up this couple, that was cheating on each other, they did run into this guy who was vomiting
Yeah.
violently when they were at at this particular concert. You kind of look at that and then you kind of poo poo it off because you're like, I don't know what's going on. I know that this is going to have something to do with something because they really focused on this
Yeah.
guy, you know, throwing up. But um, after they go to the street food stall, she gets violently ill. So they end up getting on the bus, and Lizzie's condition gets even worse. And she asks Charlotte for more ibuprofen. She ends up falling asleep for a while. Lizzie ends up waking up even sicker than before and starts, yelling out, hey, that she needs to get off the bus because she has to, well, basically, she has to relieve herself, but she was
Hmm.
literally just saying, hey, look, I
I'm
got
about
to
to shit
shit. I'm going to
myself.
shit myself. And
Yeah.
I,
I've
I,
been there.
I give her credit. I don't,
I've been there.
what are you talking about? A good cough, a
Ooh,
sneeze, or a
It's
laugh,
like,
and
I
you were
can't
just
walk. I'm like,
spraying every damn
oh,
way?
girl, I have been there.
Well, well, yeah, but that scene, and I'll definitely have to give Logan Browning credit because I felt every
Oh,
abdominal pain
man.
that she was
Yes.
claiming to have,
And she was
in the
just
scene.
looked like shit, man.
Yeah,
She
yeah,
was
that
pretty,
did make a
but still looked
difference.
like shit. I'm like, you're still hot, but you don't look good.
You're like, damn. So,
Before you get to the they drop them off at the bus, but I want you to finish everything else. So pause when you get to where the bus where they are off the bus really quick. I
okay,
didn't want to
okay,
interrupt you while you were
okay.
talking, so just
Um, well, so Lizzie is of course protesting to get off the bus, so they
yeah.
end up stopping, and she's she of course squats over, relieves herself, and she's still freaking out. She's feeling very sick. She ends up getting back on the bus, and then she throws up on the window. And when she vomits on the window as it's running down, the camera zooms in, and it appears to be a bunch of maggots, which ends up scaring Charlotte herself and
Yeah.
you know, everybody on the bus. And it's just that scene in itself, just seeing the maggots, and that was pretty brutal. So as Lizzie gets more and more panicked after actually seeing maggots in her vomit, she starts to upset the other people who are on the bus because she's freaking out. And of course, freaking out can be contagious. And she starts screaming that her brain is on fire and that she can feel something crawling under her skin. So she kind of suspects that she's caught an illness that had been spreading through China recently. Cue the guy who was vomiting earlier in the episode. So now we're all thinking, hey, this is all tied together. So in the frenzy, Lindsay ends up slamming her head in the bus window. She is crying, and you're like, man, she's in so much agony, and she's busting her head against the window. And then the bus driver at this point has just totally had it. So he ends up kicking them, off the bus, and it's somewhere out in China, in some rural part of China, and it basically tells them, hey, get off here and just, walk to the village.
Right.
Liz starts to vomit once again, and this time it's spiders coming out of her vomit. And then she ends up really freaking out after that. She's violently scratching her arms and all of her body. And then, I thought that it looked to me like they were cockroaches. They started crawling out of her arm.
Yeah. And then, right. And then as Charlotte says, okay, so before we talk about what happened next, I want to just really quick reflect about what we've seen so far in this movie. So I had no idea what this movie was about. No clue. I read the description on Netflix, but I had not really researched anything, looked at anything, was, intrigued because you were texting me and as you were watching it and you're like, holy shit. And I was like, okay, so maybe this movie's pretty good. There was to me, 3 parts of this movie. It was almost like 3 different movies because my brain was processing the story in such different ways as the movie goes. So you got the first piece where I said it was like Black Swan. But then when she starts to get sick, I'm like, okay, so she's sick and she's got that, I thought she has the virus that the guy has, just like you, we're everybody would assume. And now you're thinking, okay, so she, where is this? I was so at this point, so confused. And then when we hit that next piece, and this is before the rest of it, but the next piece, the next part, I stood up and was like, "Oh no!" I must be the most naive motherfucker on the planet. This movie had me on every twist and turn. I was like, "Oh my god!" So I did not follow. I did not predict the way this movie was going to go at
Who
all.
the hell could? I mean,
it's just what the fuck?
Just listening to your reaction, I'm pretty sure that anybody who watches this movie is going to have the same thing because it totally throws you a loop. You think that you know what it's about, and in a way, you're right. You just don't know. You just don't know the other 90% of what the hell is of what the hell is going on.
But you're trying to predict it because because it's so bizarre, everything that's happening, and you're trying to predict it as things that you've seen in the past. That's why it's like, oh, this is a Black Swan movie. Oh, this is like a viral, CDC movie when she starts puking. And then the part you're about to talk about, I'm like, oh, shit. This is beyond Black Swan. And this is what I'm thinking at this time. This is beyond Black Swan. So it's even almost 4 parts of a movie for me. Because then we find out later, not necessarily. So it was just such a bizarre and crazy twist and turn, roller coaster ride.
Okay, so, Lizzie is, of course, freaking out. The cockroaches are crawling out of her arm. And at Charlotte's insistence, Lizzie ends up hacking off her infected right hand with a meat cleaver that Charlotte just so
Happened to
happened
pull out of her backpack.
that was what really kind of tripped me out, because she was like, "Hey, you know what you got to do. You got to
That's what
cut
I
off
was
your
gonna
hand."
say. You know
And
what
then
you
when
need
she
to do
raises
now, and she pulls out a meat cleaver, and I'm
a
like,
meat
what
cleaver,
the
and
fuck?
I
Like
am like,
I stood up like off my couch and was like, no,
you know what?
holy
Well,
shit.
well, let me ask you this, because remember, they were going around to the street, the Chinese street food vendors,
Mm-hmm.
and the cleaver that she had looks like a cleaver that you will see.
Well, that's what it shows. Yes.
So I'm wondering, did they show her take? Because I'm thinking that that's a
Later,
cleaver.
they did.
Oh, okay,
They did
yeah.
later. They did the rewind scene where they showed her in the streets with the food, and she's looking over at this wall of meat cleavers.
Yeah, okay. Because I
Yeah.
was like, because at that point I forgot that they didn't. Yeah, but it's almost comedic though. How when she's like, you know what you got to do, and she raises it up, and I'm like, where the fuck
But I mean,
did you just?
like you think about this. This is half, like, okay, half the movie maybe is done with. Like, holy shit! Like the roller coaster of back and forth of trying to guess or trying to figure out intentions or trying to understand, and then that happens, and it's not even close to being over. And the roller
Yeah.
coaster ride ahead, I'm
Oh,
like, what
oh
the
yeah.
Like, I stood up when I saw that, and I was like, oh no.
Right.
And you realize she's doing it on purpose. And that look on her face of, well, you know what you need to do now. And I was like, oh, fuck.
Well, let me tell any of our listeners, if you're not, because at this point when you're watching it, like you're in, like it's no,
Mm-hmm.
I'm flipping to some other shit. Like
No.
once you get to this part, you're like, oh shit, I gotta see, I
The
gotta see how
fuck?
this plays out. So it's totally gonna lock you in by the time you get
And it's
to the bus scene.
it's a grueling movie. Like, it's gross. If you're not good with puke and maggots and blood, yeah, you're going to want to skip this one. But anybody who's listening to this probably will be fine because we're all a bunch of fucked up people. But yeah, the normal crowd, I don't know if they'd be down with this. I see a lot of reviews complaining about, oh, there's so much throw up. Oh, there's so much. I'm like, "What?
No, it
Okay,
was
really?
good. I
It's
mean,
not that big of a
I thought that
deal.
everything that they did in this movie, it worked
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
for what they were trying to do. But just like you had mentioned earlier, um, you know, after you see this, this just all of these bad things happen to Lizzie,
Mm-hmm.
and then of course, they show her swinging the hatchet. It doesn't
Uh,
actually show her hand coming off, but you knew the result,
it came off.
So
Yeah.
it ends up being revealed that Charlotte drugged Lizzie with her mother's hallucinogenic pills. So basically tricking her into thinking that they were ibuprofen, and she orchestrated everything to lead Lizzie to cutting off her hand. um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, just everything from her stealing the cleavers you had mentioned, going back, showing some clips of like the restaurant they visited. It kind of reminds you of, gosh, what's the movie? What's it, The Usual Suspects? How
Yeah.
they start flashing back to everything that went on to
They
kind of show
do a
you what
lot of
happened.
reruns. I liked that kind of
Yeah, yeah.
reverse. Yeah, I liked that.
And I thought that worked. So 3 weeks pass, and Anton and Paloma guide the selected Chinese student Zhang Li around back off to show her the chapel, an acoustically perfect room where only the best students like Lizzie and Charlotte are allowed to play. That night, Lizzie arrives at back off. Anton and Paloma are shocked to see her hand has been cut off, and they're even more disturbed and alarmed to find out that Lizzie was accusing Charlotte of being responsible for her losing her hand, claiming that she abandoned Lizzie after Lizzie had severed her own hand. So the next day, Lizzie is distraught to discover that Anton is kicking her out of back off, stating that there's no reason for her to stay now that her hand is gone. So now Lizzie is in a position where the one thing that she relied on life, the one thing that she was known for, the one thing that she was good at was gone because of her cutting off her own hand, but then on top of that, reaching back out to Anton and Paloma, who were people who recruited her and believed in her and treated her very special when she was able to provide, this great music, which obviously they're cashing in
Mm-hmm.
on. on these kids. So that was a pretty sad thing. But I think, at that point, Christy, if I cut my hand off and I knew I had given everything to Anton and Paloma, like I'm stumping the shit out of both of them. Like I'm just like, y'all can't, they really did throw it to the wolves, but it does make you kind of wonder, how are you, or maybe this is something that I missed, because I know that it didn't get deep into the backstory
Hmm.
of like Lizzie, before she arrived at Back Off, or Charlotte, but I would hope you can't be that hot and there's nobody who wouldn't take you in, or like you have no family, or you don't have like a, you know what I mean, like
Well,
I mean, why is she that alone
I
where
think
they can
like
kick her
the
shoes off?
beginning they kind of like discussed it with Charlotte asking her kind of, I got tired of being, all violin and it wasn't my choice, and she was like, "No, no, this is my family. This is all I do. This is all I think about." Like it was clear that Lizzie's life was literally cello and this environment. She had given everything up. Like that was it. Like this was her opportunity to be this famous person, and she nailed it, and she made it her life. So yeah, I think that if
Hey, listen,
given the opportunity, nobody would close a door on her. Let's just say that. But she never had done that. So she had just dedicated her life to doing these things and didn't have anything else. And so in her mind, she's
like, you know what?
got nowhere else to go.
Christy, I understand that, but I could understand it better if I believed that there was a black person who would choose to be in China with nothing to fucking fall back on if stuff went to shit. I don't really think that there are black people like that exist, but in this case, you know what I'm saying. Like, for instance, if I don't have anything and you're gonna take me and do all of that stuff, at least do it in a familiar stomping ground, which is in America. I ain't trying to be assed out in China with no other no other fucking option, and they don't. Anyway, well, let's just move beyond that. But that's kind of strange. But that was really an asshole move for them to kind of. I mean, they literally kicked her to the curb. Like, you know what
Oh,
I mean?
totally.
So. It was pretty sad, and I take it that you would not have kept your. I mean, she was upset, but I think that she handled it way better than I could, even with one
Yeah,
hand. You know what I'm saying? So
totally.
so it flashes over to Charlotte, who's back home in Minneapolis, and Lizzie somehow has come back. She ends up breaking in. She tasers Charlotte and kicks her until she's unconscious and she can overpower her. She brings Charlotte to Anton at Bakoff, where Anton talks to Charlotte. Charlotte reveals that she came back because she saw a picture of Lizzie in a magazine where her musical note tattoo was visible. So um, that kind of keyed
Yeah.
her off to where she was, to where she was at. Because all of the people who end up at Back Off, if they are elite, they get the music note, tattoo. So this kind of keyed her off on it.
Hmm.
So knowing what had to be done to acquire the tattoo, Charlotte came back to save Lizzie, so to speak. So in another flashback, it's revealed that students of Anton who get this tattoo are those who've been chosen to play in the chapel. They are considered the best, and Anton makes these star pupils perform in the chapel. And if they make a mistake, he rapes them, making
Hmm.
them what they call in the movie
Or
paying
he
the
gets
price.
Jeffrey and the other guy or
Yeah, and
whatever.
his name is
These
Thies or whatever.
gross. And
Which is
they're
so,
gross.
yeah, it's it's like, oh man, like
Oh.
how. Oh my gosh! Like, first of all, I mean, gosh, yeah, but it's really gross and it's really awkward, and everything in these scenes are really centered so that whenever you're watching them, your focus is always on the person who is going to be the victim, so to speak. They just center them in a way where it kind of makes it more intimidating, and also the fact
Hmm.
that these these women are playing the cello. They don't want to make a mistake, and it's quiet. And there's like four people in the room, and they're staring. And then once you know their intentions, a lot of the way that the scenes are shot, it's shot in a way to make you as a viewer kind of uncomfortable because you're literally sitting in her seat, looking out at everybody looking at you, trying to be perfect. So I thought they did a great. Um, they did a great job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? With
Totally.
kind of doing that and kind of putting you in that spot. So I thought that that was cool. But at this point in the movie, what I'm sitting here thinking is, why? You know what? I'm going to read the rest of this
I'm like, all
before I get into
right.
this. Okay, so the music note tattoos on Charlotte and Lizzie kind of signify that they went through the same experience. So Charlotte planned the hand amputation in order for Lizzie to get far away from Backoff, from Anton, and from all of the brainwashing and abuse that they're enduring, right?
Mm-hmm.
So an enraged Anton ends up dragging Charlotte down to the chapel, and Lizzie and the staff at Backoff watch Charlotte as Anton tells her that he'll let her go if she achieves the perfection, which is, of course, the name of the movie. However, if she, if she so much as misses a note or does anything wrong, he threatens to rape Zhang Li.
Mm-hmm.
So Zhang Li is invited to watch the performance, unaware of the danger that she's in. So now all of the pressure is on Charlotte to play perfectly, or Zhang Li will get raped because she made a mistake. So Charlotte begs Anton not to make Zhang Li pay the price, but he doesn't answer. After the performance, Zhang Li is sent to bed by Paloma, and Anton states that Charlotte will be raped instead. So once Anton leaves, the group activate a mechanism in the chair Charlotte's trapped in to prop her up and bind her hands and her legs before they move in to start the assault. And Lizzie threatens to rape Charlotte with her hand stump.
I'm sorry, but that was so fucked up.
Hold on, first of all, I don't know
God.
if that makes me fucked up, but I was like, stomp the shit out of her. She cut your goddamn, she's the one who
she cut your hand off.
And so I'm like, well, I mean, I know that that's kind of fucked up, but at this point, I'm fully on Lizzie's side, not really knowing what's going to be revealed a little bit later. But I'm like, Lizzie, fist, stomp the fuck out of her.
Yeah.
Like, because you can't get that back. You know what I'm saying?
Nope.
You can't get that hand back. So, after Lizzie threatens to hand stump, rape Charlotte, all of a sudden,
who wrote this? That's what I want to know. What?
All of a sudden, Joffrey and Thies start clutching their chests and losing their breath, and they just basically keel over and start to die. But it's obvious that they're in a lot of pain, so they're writhing around, taking their last breaths. And so you, as a viewer, you're like, well, what the hell happened to them? So while these guys are literally dying at the feet of Lizzie and Charlotte, and at this point, Charlotte is still kind of bound up. They just start making out, and at this point, you're like, okay, now what the fuck is this damn movie about? Like, again,
I know.
Like, you know what I'm saying? It throws you off.
Now we're at that point on the ice cream or the roller coaster. Sorry, not ice cream. Roller coaster where they're like, we're going deep down. Like we're just flying downwards and going, what the fuck is going on? Like, holy shit! Another twist, another turn, crazy.
And it's weird because visually, it's really cool. But they start kissing, and now, you're like, well, damn, what the hell is going on again? It ends up being revealed that
they rewind again. Yeah.
You come to find out that they were conspiring together all along. So the movie rewinds back to Lizzie's attack on Charlotte in Minneapolis. So Lizzie is angry at Charlotte for what she did in China, but she ends up coming to understand the actions of why she did it. After a flashback shows that after Lizzie cut off her hand, Charlotte convinced her that Anton will turn her away when she needs him most and that he doesn't love her. In Minneapolis, Lizzie states that she knows Charlotte is right and the pair make a plan to bring the school down. Now, all of this is cool, but for me, there are certain points of no return. First of all, bitch, you don't have me cut off my motherfucking hand and then turn around and tell me that you did it. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I mean, she was pretty understanding. Although she did get some good kicks and tases in, so I mean,
but your hand's gone though.
I
Like
get it.
you just, you know what I'm saying? Like you went to a place, you know what I mean? You went to a place where, yeah, you've got to be called every fucker, every bitch, every heifer, anything that's disrespectful, all while I'm pounding your head, stomping your head in the wine.
Mm-hmm.
My hand got cut off. You didn't have to make me do that.
Yeah.
To make a point. But the thing that resonated with Lizzie the most was when Charlotte had told her that, Anton and Paloma were going to turn her back on her, when she needed her most. And
it happened.
Even though, the extreme of her now being an amputee happened, she kind of understood that because she learned it the hard way that, that Charlotte was right. But I ask you, Kristi, how do you move on from not having a hand, even if you understood why a person, it's kind of like somebody saying it's tough love, you know what I mean? Or whatever, I care about you, I want you to get out of this situation, but your hand though, like I just, that to me, that's something that's irreconcilable. Like you can't come back from that. Even if you make this point, I don't have a hand anymore. So is that something that you could say, oh, man, I learned my lesson and I don't have a hand, but I can forgive you enough to try to get revenge? You think you could do that?
Well, all right, that's a hard answer. You're asking a hard question. I think that I think it took the extreme of her losing her hand for her to understand and identify how brainwashed and fucked up her life was. Um, she clearly identified it that way eventually. I don't know if I would have. I'm a raging bitch, so I probably wouldn't have been like, "Wow, I really learned something today. Thank you for teaching me." Would not have been that way, but I could see why it took that to get her to that point, because like we had already established from the beginning that she was in it to win it. Like she wasn't going anywhere. She, I think that Charlotte gave her the soft, pitches about like, don't you want to do something else with your life? Don't you get tired of doing this? Don't you? And she's like, no, I love this. It's everything. It's everything to me. I love this. I love my family. I do this all day. They're my family. This is everything. And she's like, okay, so she's clearly like, she's clearly brainwashed and in it. And there's only one other thing to do. Get her to chop her hand off.
That is your cigarette joint ass wiping masturbation hand. Like that's your hand.
It's your hand.
That's like your favorite hand. Like everything you do. You wipe your eye, you grab your beer with it, you whatever. But that's your hand. I don't think
but she chopped it off herself. Now listen, I get it. You gave her the pills. But at the end of the day,
and gave her the cleaver.
She fucking chopped it off, though. I mean, I think that it's all that other girl's fault. I, honest to God, now that I know what happened and why, and look, I understand the horrific pieces that you have to pick up after being like sexually abused. So, like, I get what she was trying to do. I personally don't know. I might have killed her before I even heard the story, like when she was tasing her and kicking her. Now, later, I get it. Like, she couldn't do it. She couldn't kill her. I probably would have fucking killed her. So I made it look like an accident. But she didn't. So she got past that. I could see how she could grow from that point. Now, it would have taken her not killing her at the beginning, though, which I don't know if I would have been able to do.
Yeah, like why there's always another way. I mean, to be honest with you, if she was on the hallucinogenic drugs, and the drugs were so effective to where she would pick up a cleaver and cut off her own hands, I think that it would be just as effective if she was like, you got to punch yourself to death.
Oh,
or
totally.
You gotta, like,
totally.
You know what I mean? Or something, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh my gosh, you've got to, the bugs are crawling out of your skin, just hit yourself till you pass out, or slam your head against something till you pass out. But like your arm, that is just, but anyway, I mean, your hand. But anyway, we'll be on that a million years. But I'm with you. I probably would have never heard the story because I'd still be nubbing the fuck out of
Uh-huh.
Charlotte like right now, like 7 days later. Like, you know what a motor and a pestle is? I'll
Yeah,
be nubbing her ass into like some herb juice or something. I just
totally.
can't let that go. Now, um, back at the school, after we get this flashback,
Mm-hmm.
um, it goes back to the school. Anton ends up coming back down to check on Charlotte and the rest of the people who were down there. So Paloma ends up stepping out from the door. She's unsteady. And Anton is like, what the hell's going on with you? And then all of a sudden she starts peeing on the floor. And this surprises Anton. He's like, what's going on? What's wrong with you? Charlotte and Lizzie end up coming in the door right behind her, stating that they drugged Paloma and then stabbed her to death. And what we see as a viewer, we see her come in, she's acting all weird, she urinates and she falls over, and then we see that she has a knife in her back. So they end up telling or telegraphing Anton, hey, you know what? All of these years you did this, that, and the other to us. And not only did we kill, Joffrey and Thies and Paloma, we're going to kill you and we're going to torture you. And Anton starts going on this whole thing about, basically saying, hey, I'm crazy and I need to get help. And of course, the ladies are not hearing it. And at this point, you're
Mm-hmm.
totally rooting
Who
for
would
these two women
cut
to
his
like just
fucking
really.
balls off?
And just like you were saying, this is one of the parts in the movie where you're like, hey, if you don't like blood, you might not want to watch this. But I will say this: I do like how they played it out. It was two of them. They're younger, and they both had like knives and a cleaver. And then
Mm-hmm.
you have Anton. He's an older gentleman, but they still kind of played it like, yeah, these two, and I guess you would say, in comparison to Anton, that they were pretty petite.
Mm-hmm.
So they did let Anton get it in. Like, he literally clocks Charlotte and like knocks her out. And
Mm-hmm.
he ends up, and this is kind of justice for Lizzie. Because Anton ends up picking up one of the knives that they were stabbing him with, and he ends up like clocking Charlotte. She lands on her back. She gets in a defensive posture to keep
Mm-hmm.
Anton from stabbing her, and Anton ends up stabbing her through the forearm and just pulling that blade down, and you can just totally see her bone. It was pretty damn brutal. And of course, when he's starting to get the upper hand on Charlotte, Lizzie ends up, you know what I'm saying, from being knocked down a little bit earlier, she gets up and she like hits him in the face with a cleaver.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same cleaver that Charlotte had, right?
Yes. I mean, I don't remember, but it was definitely a big knife.
Oh my gosh, she clocks him
She
in the
did.
face. And like at this point, all three of them are like covered in blood and they are struggling. And then um Anton ends up almost about to get another knife, and it seems like he might be able to, kind of make it out, And when he's reaching for the knife, of course, Lizzie just goes, full blown beast mode. Every horror, everything that happened to her
Mm-hmm.
recently, everything came out, and she
She
just
lost her
told.
shit.
Yeah, oh my gosh, she really does like go in on him.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, you're totally
Totally.
rooting for Lizzie, and basically, Lizzie had this whole like with Anton, like I hate you, who's the bitch now, and all of this type of shit, and hey, I'm like, hey, kill him because uh, they did a lot to you, and I know that they had to have done a lot to you for me to be rooting for you killing him and not hacking Charlotte's ass up because once
Mm-hmm.
again, but anyway, anyway, a little bit time passes by. It's the same night,
Yeah.
but then we see a mutilated but still alive Anton.
Okay. I don't get that.
What?
Okay, that I'm confused on.
Well, let me just, because there's only a little bit more
Go
left,
ahead.
and then we'll come back to it.
Go ahead.
So we see a mutilated but still alive Anton. He's only dressed in his underwear. He has his mouth and his eyes sewn shut. He's missing all of his limbs, both legs and both arms. Listens as Charlotte and Lizzie perform for him in this state in the chapel, and they're both playing as one, both compensating for the other person's missing hand, which I thought was pretty damn cool
Mm-hmm.
that they were in tandem, and both of them at the end of the day, ended up basically not being able to have their
Yep.
hands. All of that stuff in the end ended up evening out. But the fact that Anton lost all of his devices, because one of the first things that Lisa said was, "We're gonna cut your dick off too."
Yep.
I don't know. Like when you look at that scene, it wasn't like it was. I don't know if maybe they sewed it up. Maybe they cut off his dick and then like sewed it up, and that's why it wasn't really bleeding. I'm making the assumption that he lost.
Didn't even think about that.
Yeah, because
I can understand why you would.
yeah. So now that I think about it, the fact that because remember they sewed up his
Yeah.
eyes, his legs. Of course, they sewed up both arms, and since she stated that they were going to cut his dick off,
Mm-hmm.
I know that that's what happened, and so maybe they went ahead and sewed that up. But I thought that the interesting thing was all of the extremities that he used to cause pain on others were gone,
Bye.
and since he loved the cello so much, he was able to listen to it, but he couldn't see it.
That's
He
it.
couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, he couldn't take it out on anybody if they made a
Yeah.
mistake. So for them, I think that was their way, of torturing him.
Mm-hmm.
And but when you see that, you're like, oh my gosh, this movie, and like I'll totally recommend this. You know what I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
to other people.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a pleasure to watch, but kind of prepare to like have your mind. I don't want to say that your mind is all over the place, but there's at least 3 times in the movie where you kind of get taken for the okie doke.
Yeah. Okay. So I totally would recommend this movie. I'm a little confused about the ending because I just didn't peg these girls for like hanging out in the house and playing tunes for the dude that molested them. I just was like, go live your best life. Like, I mean, I get cutting all his limbs off and all that.
Yeah.
Put a fucking tape on. Like, why would you be playing for him?
I think that,
No, go do something. Go
well,
eat some waffles. Like, no.
but maybe they were trying to, in a way, that was a way to
Torture
save it
him
and a
or
little
something?
bit of pleasure for them. The same way, like he got off on raping people if they made a mistake
Right,
playing the
right.
cello. So I think part of that was them kind of playing off of, you know what, you ruined our lives and you these things to us. So we're going to sit here and enjoy the pain that you're in the same way that for years and years that you were inflicted on us, because that is also the difference. It was that a lot of the things that Anton was doing to these girls were things that took place over a lot of years. And
Yeah.
to be honest with you, at this point in the movie, I kind of agree with you, Chris. I think at some point they're going to leave because I don't think that they would sit around because
Who
that would mean
would?
that somebody's going to have to change out his bag, his poop
Yeah.
bag, and all of that if they're going to sit around and try to torture this guy for years. But it was a very interesting way to end this story.
Oh,
And like I said,
definitely.
the best part of it to me was the visual of both of them in
Oh, it
tandem
was awesome.
playing cello and compensating for the other person.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
thought
weren't
it was nice.
refresh my memory because I, for some reason, am not picturing. Were they like in their underwear when they were doing it? Like
No. I think that they were. I think Charlotte had
skimpily
on that
dressed anyway.
red. Yeah, it was the
Because
red dress that she had on. When they were about to
okay,
go
okay.
down, and Lizzie had on like her. It was just some ragged
And
clothes. Or
then, so then I wonder, are you making mistakes to torture him? Because you know how he feels about mistakes. So are they playing it perfectly or are they playing it with mistakes?
yeah, and you know what was funny is like whenever you're watching Anton in the moment, he didn't look like he was. He looked like in a crazy type of way to be enjoying it.
Kind of okay, yeah.
I mean,
I
you
mean,
know what I'm saying? So it was
you
weird.
know, I kind of like movies like that. I want to like figure out and discuss things like this. Like, I don't want it to be so black and white. I was kind of like, what? Why? What are you doing? And wow, you're really fucked up. And I'm so sorry. And I just want you to live your best life. But if this is your best life, then good on you. As far as the girls, not him. But
Yeah.
I mean, I was, maybe I'm just super simple, but I enjoyed this movie, and I really liked that I was taken on a complete, absolute roller coaster joyride through everything. I kept thinking I knew what was going on, and then every so many 20 minutes was thrown for a loop, and I was introduced to something completely different and a new concept. So applaud. I applaud this movie. I thought it was for just a Netflix series or Netflix movie. psh,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
It's fantastic.
Netflix. Netflix. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can roll your eyes on with
Sure.
Netflix, but they still have a lot of great content on it, and
Yep.
they do have a lot of great Netflix original series. But I tell you what, like Allison Williams, like we both agreed that like Logan Browning, who plays Lizzie, she's off the chain.
Yeah.
Like, but Allison
Allison Williams
Williams
was
at the end,
fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah.
but at the end when she had cut all of her hair off, like her hotness went up like
Yeah.
tenfold.
Well,
When she had the short hair.
and I was already excited when I started watching the movie, knowing she was in it, because Get Out is like one of my favorite horror movies. I
Yeah.
just watched it again the other day. Like, if that movie's on, I have to watch it.
Oh,
And I love it. I love that movie. I don't know what it is. It just, I love it. And so when I found out she was in this, it made me really excited. And I didn't know she was in it until I started watching it. And then I was like, I know her. I know her. And then I looked this movie up and I was like, yep, that's exactly who I thought it was from Get Out. Because I was like,
yeah.
it's because
Yeah.
the way the beginning, she's really frumpy because her mom's dying and she's kind of like sitting there. And so I'm
Yeah.
like, I know who that is. I know her. She looks like the girl from Get Out. And then I looked it up and I'm like, yep. So yeah. And then
I,
Lizzie is like, whoa, hello. Thank you.
oh shit. Us came out on fucking iTunes tonight. I'm like looking at it now. I'm like, I'm about to buy this shit.
Hell
Anyway, I
yeah.
didn't mean to get off topic, but I just so happened to see this pop up in my queue. But I liked, as far as like I did, with Jordan Peele doing the Get Out, I
Hmm.
preferred Us over Get Out.
Yeah.
However,
Hmm.
um I do like the job that she did in Get Out. You know what I mean?
I
But
thought
I
she was
prefer
great.
Us is like really way more up my alley, just
Hmm.
main because there are so many different things that a person could take out of it, and
Hmm.
everybody's take will probably be a little bit different as far as
Yeah.
to what it's about, so to speak.
Hmm.
But yeah, I can totally dig that. But when looking at this movie, The Perfection, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. It's totally a passing grade for me. Because it kept me wondering what was happening next. They gave me a bunch of surprises. I can't complain really about too much that was in it. It's just the fact that you have to be ready to literally go on a roller coaster to
Yeah.
kind of make it through this movie, but it's not so long that it takes you out of it. Like
Right.
I actually, to be honest with you, if this movie would have probably gone another 10 or 15 minutes, I would have been cool with it
Hmm.
because after like the third okey doke, I'm like, okay, I'm really into this. But for me, it gets a passing grade. I definitely recommend it. Um, to other people because like we mentioned earlier, Netflix has an abundance of stuff, but I
Right.
also feel like a lot of the stuff that they produce and that they put the money up for, I give them credit because Netflix gives a lot of different writers, directors, all of these people different opportunities to put out content. And I have to definitely give them props for that. You've got tons of, women who do stuff on Netflix, people of color get opportunities to direct and to write. And that's what I'll give Netflix the nod over a lot of other major studios that are trying to play catch up is
Hmm.
that there's a reason why there is a draw of all of these Hollywood actors doing things that are on streaming services now
Absolutely.
because they're getting way more opportunities than they do with the big studios. And the big studios are going to have to they're going to have to take heed. They're going to have to take heed because positions can reverse.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And pretty much
Absolutely,
everybody's
in a
like, you know what?
heartbeat. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I'd rather watch streaming and get these movies than,
Yeah.
go to the movies or watch, these primetime things. So for me, it's a 7 out of 10. I'm definitely going to recommend it to people. What about you? What would you rank it on a scale of 1 to 10,
Oh,
Kristi?
this was a hard one to rank. There's a lot of like things that I liked about it, and then there was a few things that I felt were kind of campy and almost funny, like, and not in a like good funny way. But I think that the twists and the turns really won out for me on this one, and the hot lesbian sex scenes definitely won out. So I'll give it a 7.5.
Okay.
I think the pieces that really bugged me about it, I wasn't a fan of the very end of it. It was fine. I felt like it could have been better. I don't know. I wanted to see them not investing in this dude. Like, okay, you cut his shit off and like move on. I didn't like how they like ended it that way. And there was a couple of pieces throughout the movie that were like you're laughing a little bit because it's so crazy that you can't
Yeah.
believe you're
Yeah.
watching this. But
Mm,
overall, it took me on such a huge emotional ride that I had to give it a lot of respect in that way.
you know what,
So,
Kristi, did you watch the second season of Luke Cage, the one that had Bushmaster in it? Or
no,
did you
huh?
watch that?
Huh.
Well, the scene where Charlotte throws up her arm and Anton stabs her and like drags the knife
Yeah.
down.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
you see it,
Mm.
that the way that those special effects are done, I saw it. I've seen it like in another couple of movies. I saw
Mm-hmm.
it in Luke Cage was the first show that I saw it in. There's a character called Bushmaster, and he stabs a guy in one eye and then drags the blade all the way across to his other eye,
Mm.
and it's like that same effect.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was what was that Netflix original that had what's the guy who plays the new Captain Kirk? What's his name? The actor who plays the new Kirk in the new Star Trek movies,
Oh,
Chris Pine.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was the movie where he played what was it, Robert Bruce or whatever. It was that Netflix movie. You know what I'm
Really?
talking about?
Okay, I haven't seen that, but I know
No, it
Robert the
was the one. It
Bruce.
was the one we talked about it because it was the one with Chris Pine. Like they were talking about, he showed his penis or whatever in the when he was taking that bath. We talked about it on the show.
I don't know
Well,
about
well. Anyway,
penises.
he plays Robert the Bruce, this
Mm-hmm.
historical character. But there's a scene in that movie where this guy gets disemboweled. Like they hang him, and he's like they basically lynching him, and when they pull him up, a character in that movie stabs him like in the stomach and pulls it down, and then all of the guts pour out. But it's the same effect. So people have been using that effect recently,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so unique how it looks. Like it just really is ingrained in my brain. I'm like, oh
Mm-hmm.
shit, that's that effect again or whatever, right?
Like dragging, yeah, like
Yeah, the whole dragging and
yeah.
then like animating
Mm-hmm.
it, open
That
it's
was
just it's
ugly. You know
yes,
what? It did not ring a bell on me, and I was like, ooh, when I saw
yeah,
it.
but oh my gosh, but that is that's something that I've seen done like over the last couple of years, like 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
But the effect is so kind of awesome but weird because it's very hard to like animate and do a special effect to make that look convincing, because let's be real, only in movies do you slice somebody like that and it totally like spreads open and then just you know what I mean,
Sure,
so
of
that's totally
course.
like some things to be more extreme, visually, to the viewer, but it's a cool ass effect. And that Robert the Bruce, if you don't watch that whole thing, just watch the guy getting disemboweled in the village, and you're gonna be like, you know what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
anyway, definitely a solid flick. Moni gave it a 7 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
So we all are 7 or slightly above that. So we definitely endorse this. And for the next show, um, Moni is going to review, or basically, we're all going to talk about the new season of Black Mirror, which premieres on Wednesday, June the 5th. And I think Anthony Mackie, and yeah, it's quite a few, you know, more familiar faces that are going to be in it, which worries me. Like I used to like Black Mirror when I didn't know none of the actors.
Yeah,
They're,
that's my
British,
thing.
you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm like, the
Oh, I don't know Miley
Americanized.
Cyrus. Come
Yeah,
on.
and that's the other thing. So you just reminded me because I had
Oh.
blocked that out of my fucking head, and I'm already thinking. And it's already bad enough that Anthony Mackie is going to be the new Captain America. Is that whenever I see him, I just think he's the guy who got roasted by Eminem in that fucking Black
Mm-hmm.
Mile movie, and I'm like, ugh. I mean, I don't care. Like, I totally support him being that version of Cap, but like him as an actor, I always remember him from that movie, and I'm like, I just never have been 100% on board, and I know that's kind of wrong because
Mm-hmm.
that was just one movie, which was about like 20 years ago or however long ago it was. And I still hold that against Anthony Mackie when, hey, it's a movie. He really didn't lose the rap battle. But if it was a real rap battle, Eminem would have still won. But anyway, um, yeah, but
Sorry.
like him and Miley Cyrus, and I'm like, why? I really hope
Mm-hmm.
that this is one of those things where they're promoting Miley Cyrus to promote the series, but she's really
Mm.
not going to be in it that much. Or she's like, you know what I mean? And I don't want to. I don't
Or
know. Is she a good actor?
so,
Have you?
I don't
Wasn't
know.
she like a Disney kid or like some type
Yeah,
of a
I mean, she
something?
was a freaking Nickelodeon kid.
Oh, that's what it
And I
was.
know because my daughter loved her as Hannah Montana like a decade ago, but and I like her music, okay, but I'm not, come on. I mean, listen, if you want to like explore your talent, I'm cool with it. And if Black Mirror thinks that she's talented enough to play a part, again, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt, but
No,
Miley Cyrus. I mean, that's just that
somebody special.
name doesn't give
She,
you like,
she's somebody
yay!
special.
I'm so glad Miley Cyrus is in Black Mirror. No, nobody's gonna say that.
But
Nobody.
that but like for me, like Miley Cyrus, she's had a pretty good career. Like when she was doing the Nickelodeon thing, she had a good career. She had a good
Hannah
career,
Montana,
doing
yeah.
her music. Like I'm just saying, like she's had her moment where her career had that upward, trajectory. And
Yeah.
then I guess to a sense you could say it kind of leveled off. We're not seeing as much of her. Doesn't mean that she's not doing things behind the scenes, but like we've kind of had saw her peak. And for me, whenever you're doing things like Black Mirror, these are opportunities that studios have to introduce us to new talent. Like, I'm pretty sure that she's cool, but I'd rather somebody else get, an opportunity.
I just
With
like
it,
new people in this show. I don't want to see people I know in this show. I think it's because it's supposed to be in the future and about technology, and so I don't want to see people I see in other things in this movie. I don't know what it is. I think we have just kind of this protective space in this show. So I'm not exactly thrilled, but like I said, I'll go ahead and give her the benefit of the doubt. And then we'll probably diss the shit out of her,
well,
next week.
I'll give her the doubt of the benefit because I ain't looking for it. I'm not looking forward to. I'm just not as hype as I was before, and I think that this Black Mirror is going to have less. Less. I think what they say was going to be like 3 different stories or 2 or something like that. I
Yeah,
think it's
I
going to
think
be.
it's 3.
Yeah, it's not going to be as. I'm just from what I was reading, I think it's like 1 less than they did like the last time or something. But it's Black Mirror. I'm gonna give it a chance, and this is a good week. June
Mm-hmm.
is a great week for a lot of things. Just like I mentioned, hey, on the podcast, we're recording this early in the week, but the fact that Us is out, then we got Black Mirror coming out, and then I think
Right.
the week after next, we got Chucky coming out, and then there is there's so much.
It's the summer.
Yeah, it's summer is totally in full effect, and just like you said, you're recommending Godzilla,
I
and it's just
do, yeah.
I guess if people are into it and want to give it a chance, you've got that X-Men movie coming out or whatever. But
Oh, Dark
um,
Phoenix. Yeah,
yeah, so
I'm not a big fan of X-Men. I'm sorry. I'm just not. And I'm cool with
not.
people that are, but it's just not my bag.
I think like a lot of people think that they started going downhill. I did like Days of Future Past. I thought that was okay, but I don't like uh I'm not a fan of Jennifer Lawrence. You know what I mean? And the only reason why I'm not a fan of her in these movies is just because when you get someone who was riding as high as she was and she started being in these X-Men movies, it kind of seemed like there was a requirement for them to all of a sudden make Mystique like the centerpiece for fucking X-Men movies. And I'm sorry, but no, like Mystique, you know what I mean? But it's because it's her. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Like she's got way more to do, and I'm like, that's what really turned me off. I'm like, nah, like Mystique is not a fucking headliner, or shouldn't be a headliner in shit. You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? And plus, her, like I said, I'm kind of like, with her, in particular as an actress. But the fact that I'm gonna be honest with you, I grew up with the X. Look, I grew up reading X-Men. I grew up, with the X-Men animated series. I'm all about that X-Men life. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
I'm kind of happy that at some point, it might be 10 years down the road, that Marvel will get an opportunity, if they choose, to do something, with the X-Men franchise. But when they started kind of pandering to her popularity, I was like, no, you don't make Mystique more interesting than Magneto. You know what I'm saying? You don't
Right.
make Mystique more interesting than some of these other people. So I was kind of down on it from that front. However, um, the franchise will be put out of its misery soon, and I'm so happy about that. But it is the summer. There's a lot of great content. And is there anything else that you've seen over the last week that you want to let our listeners I want to check out?
I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I did finish the show, The Leftovers. I started watching it. It was interesting. I was entertained. I thought it was okay. It was good. I don't want to like build it up too much because I think different people will probably have different interpretations about it. But I personally felt like it was kind of a cool concept and dug it. I'm watching Santa Clarita Diet. I'm
Yeah.
unfortunately inching my way through it, having a hard time getting through this season, and I heard it's been canceled. So I was upset about it until I started watching the third season, and now I'm like, oh, yeah, it's a struggle. Maybe it's just me. It's getting a little ridiculous. So I think we just get
Yeah.
to those points sometimes where things are like, okay. So that's me in a nutshell. I have been, and look, something you'll know about me really quick is my comfort zone is the Twilight Zone. And on Netflix right now, they have the entire catalog of the Twilight Zone. And I have been watching it. It's the thing I turn on. That music at the beginning, it just soothes my soul. I know that sounds so ridiculous, but do 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 do.
Yeah.
That makes me happy. That like makes me like calm. And I have been working my way through all the seasons of Twilight Zone when I'm in a lull on shows. So that's what I'm doing right now. And I have a lot of okay, I've never seen Madman. I want to watch that. I have a lot of movies in my queue. I'm just getting ready to make the commitment because to me it's a commitment. So that's what up with me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can wrap this puppy up. The only thing, I mean, no, there's nothing that I have really, like I said, I watched The Perfection. Obviously, we did the review. The only, I do want to see that movie, The Man Who Killed Don Quixote.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to check that out. And of course, Us is out. So, of course, we did a review on this. I can't recommend it more.
Oh,
I'm
it's
definitely
great.
going to buy it
Yeah,
and,
no,
um,
no, you
and
gotta watch
rewatch it.
it. So gotta
And
watch that. It's such a good movie. It was awesome. Yeah.
absolutely, it's a
Yep.
great movie. And, something probably up Moni's alley. Medea, A Family Funeral. No, I'm just bullshit. I would rather watch. Look, I would rather watch
What?
Medea. I would rather watch Medea fight
Oh my god.
Thanos than watch like a Jennifer Lawrence and X Men
Yeah.
movie. But anyway, we'll kind of
Well,
yeah.
that's an
Oh,
interesting.
Medea
That's an
versus
interesting
Thanos.
debate.
Yeah, Medea versus Thanos, like the battle for
How would
Boromir.
that
You know what I'm saying, or
happen?
something like that.
You know
But
what? I think you have a script writing session ahead of you. I want to hear
absolutely.
the story about that.
My gosh. But you know what? Everybody, thanks for listening. This is fun. And this is actually one of our longest episodes. Like we
It
totally
is.
were like
We
at first
really nerded out this episode.
I know. Like, how do we have a shorter show with 3 people, and then we just went on our rants? But hey, that's what people listen in for, and we do it for them, you know?
Right. I was thinking that we were gonna have to fill in to make an hour, and I'm like, wow, it's an hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah, the reason, you know what I'm saying, what ate up most of the time, once we started talking about this goddamn Batman and the swamp thing, we kind of went off. Oh no, and Godzilla. So we went on a few tangents earlier. But you know what? I mean, we're geeks or nerds. We're fans of all of this stuff. So it's kind of easy to get off on tangents. And you know what? It's been a while since back in the day when you used to do that other podcast that like me and you have done like a show by ourselves. But you know what? I definitely had fun, and I definitely look forward to Moni, all of us, talking about Black Mirror
I'm
on the
about
next show. And to be honest with you, the fact that we all came down around the same line with what we rated the perfection thought was pretty cool. It just meant that all of us kind of enjoyed it because at least I knew Moni. Moni was like, I tried to watch it, and I was like, you must only watch like 5 minutes of it because there's no way that you made it to the bus scene.
Well, there's too many things happening that you could turn it off at the beginning and be like, this is just bullshit. No, you have to watch this movie to the end to form an opinion. And if you say you turned it off early, your opinion's bullshit. Because you can't form an opinion on this movie only watching it within like a few minutes or even halfway. Like, no, it's not possible. So everybody can fuck off who's done that. I don't even believe your shit. That's all I'm saying.
Well, all right. Well, do you have anything else before we wrap this puppy up outside of
housekeeping? Housekeeping is please leave us a review on our respective sites, whatever your listening platforms are, iTunes, Podbean. I think there's the Podcast Addict app that seems to be really popular from what is it? What is that other? Samsung. That Android thing that y'all do. I'm just kidding.
That Android thing. I don't know.
Android. I'm just joking. Android. I was fucking with everybody. Androids. So if you guys could leave us a review, that would be awesome. We've had a couple of trolls in there, and I know why they're leaving the bad reviews, but we could just get some good reviews in there. I mean, we're at a 4.0. We're fine, and we're not like suffering. But we have a lot of listeners here, and I would really appreciate it if you guys took some time to clicky on the starry.
Yeah, and let me say this really quick. And also, we're always down, because, you can find us at the Creeping Real Show. There's a Facebook page that, Kristi always knocks out of the park with, good things on that. Also, there's creeping_it. Which is on Twitter. But our inboxes and our DMs are always open because when we initially started doing this podcast, we were keeping it more towards the paranormal thing, like paranormal and horror. And then, but at the same time, as time goes on, there's a lot more things to discuss. So, but we always had the handle of, we talked about pop culture. So anything that, any recommendations that our listeners can give us of things to check out, we would appreciate that. And if there's certain content that you might want us to discuss, feel free to drop us a message on the page, in our DMs or whatever, or the messenger, and we'll look at it. And if it's something dope or something that we feel like we can pull off, we have no problem with personalizing content based off of the things that our listeners want, because there's so much stuff out there. We haven't seen everything. We can't see everything. And if there's something really good that you've seen that you think that it would be fun to listen to us talk about, whether that's sober or drunk, we will get after it. If you say do this podcast drunk, we'll do it drunk.
Hell yeah.
About this particular topic.
Absolutely. And I'm always interested in hearing, like you said, about different stories and things you've experienced. I don't care how far-fetched it is. I want to hear about it because I'm not, everything's 100% true, but I'm here and I'm open to listen and to tell stories. So if you have a great story or great experience, please share it with us because we're all about that shit. So with that, I would love to thank my host, Yardley, because we really do enjoy what we do. This is not our full-time job. This is just a side gig, and Yardley's got like 20 side gigs, but this is one of them. And he's got a lot of podcasts. He is the podcast dude. He is podcast master. We bow down to his podcasted
You know what?
kingliness.
You
And
know what,
what?
Kristi?
What?
Well, just let me say this. I have kind of cut down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because you know how much time goes into this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And
do.
a lot of the podcasts that I was doing before, like all of the shows are ending. You know what I mean? Are like over.
Is
So
Black
now-
Sails ending?
So now it's like, oh, Black Sails is
Gone?
ended like
I haven't
2
watched
or 3
it.
years ago.
Oh, okay. I haven't watched it, so.
However, if you would like to hear many of my Black Sails podcasts, which we do get actors and the cast on our show, just look up just Google Talking Black Sails Indie Radio, and Kente and I have actually that's one of my favorite series. If you want to know how to end a series, Black Sails is a prime example that you can close out strong. But anyway, yeah, I've kind of I've cut down just mainly because a lot of shows are over. So, there'll be other stuff coming up in the future, and some of the stuff that we'll actually be reaching out to you and Moni to jump on some shows as well.
I got a message from Moni, or maybe that was on our joint one, where she wants to start doing some Chernobyl discussions. So I'm going to plug into that one. Yeah, I heard it's awesome.
I heard that it's great.
I think we should absolutely include that in kind of the opener of our shows if we so choose. But I'm down for whatever. That's what the show's about. I don't want everything to be the way I want it, because I'm just me. I want everybody to have a piece of an interest in the show, which is why we have 3 people choosing the content. I mean, who wants just one person deciding what we discuss? That's not fun. So that's what I love about having 3 people here. We all decide what the topics are, and we all have a vested interest, but we're all also successful individuals in careers. So this podcast isn't going to be our end all be all, but it's something that we have fun with, and I think that's what makes it the way it is. So I'm glad that we have it the way it is. I miss Moni. She'll be back soon, and Black Mirror is up to bat.
Yep. And all right, well, with all that being said, everybody, until next time, keep it real.
I must say you look nice tonight. Hope you're not alone, but if you are, I thought I might keep you company if you don't mind. I'm just trying to be more sociable and open up my mind to engage on these one-on-ones with a beautiful stranger. Not something I do. You be doing me a favor. Show me a few tips and not to come off like I'm thirsty. Just a down-to-earth person who always busy working, trying to make new friends, do new things.